We've got some pretty heavy nerfs to Yanara, Aurora, and Qiyana for 25.18, while Amumu's support looks to make a push back into meta and tank junglers become stronger. So we'll be covering all this and much more in today's video as we provide you guys with a full breakdown and analysis of the 25.18 changes, along with a tier list update for every single role. And let's be honest, picking the best champions is fun, but is that really enough on its own? I don't know about you, but locking in Volibear just because he's OP doesn't really help if you're lacking knowledge on how to clear your jungle. However, you can begin flying through your clears at optimal speeds by using our extensive catalog of clear courses that are going to teach you everything you need to know to have you speed running any game below Diamond in no time. And that's just for jungle. Your mid lane OP tier Diana pick becomes actually unstoppable when you know all the essentials of mid, like how to win lane, when to roam, how to properly play the later game, and much more, as our top 10 challenger player Strompist has worked tirelessly on this course to have you climbing in no time. Our tier list gets you the right champions, SkillCapped gets you the right skills. And we're so confident it works, if you don't climb 5 divisions while actively using the platform, you literally don't pay a single cent. So why hold yourself back this season and finally get the rank you deserve? And with that being said, let's get into it. So we'll start off by looking at all the item changes that Riot has cooked up, as Bami's Cinder is in line for a buff. The passive bonus damage to monsters is going up from 50 to 100%. So on paper, this seems like it would be a nice buff to a majority of tank junglers, but when you look at what rush item most tank junglers are prioritizing right now, most of them aren't actually rushing Sunfire. Sejuani rushes Heartsteel, Amumu goes Liandry's, Rammus rushes Thornmail, and Skarner goes for Heartsteel. Zac is the only tank jungler who's been rushing Sunfire Aegis at a significant rate, so he'd be the champ to benefit the most from Bami's gaining power. There's a chance that we could see build priority shift as a result of this Bami's buff though, as tank junglers could rush the item, proceed to build into a core item like Heartsteel or Liandry's, and then fully complete Sunfire as their second item. If this does end up being a legit strategy, then this Bami's buff could actually be meaningful, but if not, then it'll end up as a pretty insignificant change, so we'll be sure to keep you guys in the loop if build priority does shift. Sunfire Aegis is getting buffed as well, with its passive minion and monster damage going from 50 to 60%. So this one will be a straight buff to most tanks across the board, and even though tanks in the jungle haven't been all that great lately, both Ornn and Malphite have been very strong up in the top lane for solo queue, so they just get even better due to this change. We've got one ADC item on the buff list for this patch, and it's Mercurial Scimitar. So not a core item on any ADC, which means the buffs won't actually end up being all that significant, but here's what we're working with. AD is going up from 40 to 50, magic resist is down from 40 to 35, and then active movement speed duration is going from 1.5 to 2 seconds. So 10 AD has a gold value of 350, while 5 magic resist has a gold value of 100, so just from those two changes, the item is gaining 250 gold worth of stats. When you tack on the movement speed buff as well, it's actually a pretty decent buff. It's just not realistic to purchase Mercurial as a core item though in most cases, so you won't actually be able to take advantage of this buff in most games due to it being a 4th or 5th pickup. So of all top lane champions who could be buffed right now, Riot has decided to buff Garen. Garen's EAD ratio per spin is going up from 36 scaling to 48% to 38 scaling to 50%. So if we look at the comparison clips, we can see that when you have your E maxed out and Stridebreaker completed, it's about a 20 damage increase if you get every single tick of E damage off. So not a crazy buff by any means, but it will just solidify Garen's spot in meta as he will remain placed in the S tier. We've got a pretty significant early game buff for Jace on the way, as his Q damage is going up from 60 to 80 at rank 1 in the spell. When you get Q fully maxed out, the damage will be the same, but Jace main should be pretty happy about this one as his early game bully strength becomes stronger. You'd rather an early game buff than a scaling buff on Jace anyways, because snowballing with the champion is really important. So we'll be lifting Jace from his C tier slot and bringing him up to B for 25.18. Illaoi is going to receive a couple of adjustments, so let's have a look. Passive will no longer spawn tentacles during teleport. W max health damage is going from 4% per 100 total AD to 3.5% per 100 total AD. So on your one item spike, this means you'll be losing around 8 damage per W, and the more AD that you acquire, the more of a loss in damage this change will be. There's one buff being issued, and it's to Illaoi's E, as the vessel duration is going up from 3 to 4 seconds. Whether these adjustments land as buffs or nerfs is tough to say. It's all going to come down to how significant that E buff actually is, because it needs to make up for the loss in damage from W. For now, we're going to leave Illaoi placed in the top lane A tier, and if the adjustments end up shifting Illaoi's power significantly, then we'll provide an update for the mid-patch tier list. So moving on to the top lane tier list now. We've already talked about Jace bumping up into B tier, but Malphite and Aurora are also being moved around. With the Sunfire Aegis buffs coming through, we don't expect for them to be that significant, but Malphite has already been on the verge of OP in recent patches, so any sort of buff should be enough to tip the scales. Aurora is being pushed down to C tier, and we'll have a full breakdown when covering mid lane, but basically, she's lost a good chunk of damage from her passive for this patch, which will reduce her bully power in lane, and she's already been performing pretty bad in recent patches besides in the elite tiers of play, so we don't think she'll be worth playing for the average player in 25.18. 2015. So Warwick, Quinn, and Malphite are going to be the 3 champs up in the OP tier. Malphite is arguably the best blind pick top right now because as long as you ban out Sylas and can avoid the Mordekaiser matchup, then there's few others that can really shut him down, and you can be consistently impactful in nearly every single game. If you really want to take matters into your own hands and hard win lane, both Quinn and Warwick are the best in class right now, as once you know your limits on each champion, then you can just stomp lanes super hard. Sylas has been the second most popular jungler, only behind Lee Sin in recent patches, so Riot will be nerfing his clear speed with passive monster damage going from 150 to 130%. So with a full combo, this is going to equate to around a 70 loss in damage, which is pretty significant. Sylas has been hovering around a B and A tier level over the past few patches, and we don't think the nerf should be enough to drop him down to C, so we'll be placing him in B for 25.18. Volibear has been the most OP jungler over the past few patches, so a nerf is on the way with his passive attack speed AP ratio going from 4% per 100 AP to 3% per 100 AP. So on your Cosmic Drive completion, we can see in the comparison clips that you're losing 1% attack speed per stack of Volley's passive, and since you can reach a max of 5 stacks, the max amount of attack speed you'll be losing from this nerf is 5%. 5% attack speed has a gold value of 125, so it's really not that significant of a nerf. If Volley's core build consisted of more than one AP item, then we'd have a different conversation, but since Cosmic Drive is the only AP item he buys, an AP ratio nerf like this isn't that impactful. At the very most, we would see Volley dropping down into the S tier, but for now, we'll be leaving him in the OP tier due to how light this nerf is looking. Briar is going to be issued a couple of adjustments for this patch that swap around some power in her kit. Q damage is going to be lowered as the base value at max rank is going down from 180 to 160, while the typical damage of Q is being swapped from magic to physical. R will have its sound effect trigger 1 second after cast instead of immediately on cast, and the damage of R is going down as the bonus AD ratio is being removed. R range is going up though from 10,000 units to 12,000 units, and we can see on the minimap that if you are down in bot lane, you'll now be able to reach the Grub and Baron pit. So you're losing damage in exchange for more reliable R, which we think should land net negatively. Especially with the R range buff, it's not even a change that you will benefit from in every single game, whereas the loss in damage from Q and R will be felt. Briar has been excelling in recent patches, so the changes may not be enough to actually push her down the tier list, as we still see her being in the A or S tier, and S is where we will be leaving her for now. So for the jungle tier list in 25.18, there's not a ton of movement as the OP tier stays the same, with Volibear leading the way. Qiyana is being pushed down into B tier as she's being nerfed quite significantly, and we'll cover those changes in detail when going over mid lane. As mentioned earlier in the video, tank junglers should see a small uptick in power due to the Bami's Cinder buffs, but Zac is the only one who we're confident actually gains significant strength, since he's the only jungler currently rushing Sunfire Aegis. We can definitely see Zac making his way into S tier if the Bami's buff does land well, but for now, we're going to leave him in A, and could adjust for mid patch depending on how impactful the buff lands. Mid lane is going to see a bunch of impactful changes for this patch, as first up, we've got some buffs to Cassiopeia. Base mana is going up from 400 to 450, which for a champion who is entirely gated around her mana pool when it comes down to solo killing early in lane, this is a really nice buff. E-poison base damage is being increased as well, but only from the second point onwards in the spell, as it will be the same at rank 1. So it's when you hit level 4 or level 3 if you decide to put 2 points into E and skip W, where you will start to benefit from this E buff. Overall, some pretty nice buffs to Cassio's early game kill threat, and we're going to give her a push from A into S tier. Hui really doesn't need buffs right now, but he'll be getting a few anyway with his passive AP ratio going from 30 to 35%. WQ movement speed is up from 20 scaling to 30% to 30 scaling to 40%, and then the AP ratio on WQ movement speed is up from 2% per 100 AP to 3% per 100 AP. And then EAP ratio is buffed going from 60 to 65%. Hui has been really close to an S tier spot in recent patches, so with these buffs coming through, we're going to give him a push up for 25.18. A couple of Annie nerfs are on the way, with her W base damage going down from 70 scaling to 250 to 70 scaling to 230. Our passive magic pen is dropping as well from 15 scaling to 20% to 10 scaling to 20%. So as we can see in the mid game, this will equate to around a 27 damage loss if you're using Q and W. These nerfs shouldn't turn Annie into a terrible pick by any means, but her time in S tier will be coming to a close as we're dropping her into A. Aurora is going to be losing some percent health damage on her passive as it's dropping from 2.5 all the way down to 1%. So the longer the game drags out, the more significant this nerf will be. However, even right from level 3, your standard combo of Q1 into E and then Q2 will be dealing 10 less damage. And 10 less is basically the minimum, because the more health the enemy gets with levels, the greater the loss in damage it will be. So there's definitely going to be much better mid lane champs to choose from for 25.18, as we're going to place Aurora in the mid lane B tier, but there's a chance we drop her to C during the mid patch tier list, pending the exact severity of the nerf. It's a pretty pro play focused patch for mid lane because even with Aurora and Azir not performing great in solo queue, they are both nerfed due to pro. Azir is going to have his attack speed growth lowered from 5.5 to 5%, and then WAP ratio is going down from 45 scaling to 65% to 40 scaling to 60%. We've had Azir down in the depths of C tier for a while now, and of course he will remain there as a result of these nerfs. We've got a few Galio nerfs going live for this patch, with passive AP ratio dropping from 45 to 40%. Q% health tick damage is dropping as well from 2.5% to 2%, which ends up being around a 26 loss in damage when you are on 2 items. Nerfs shouldn't drop Galio down to being a weak pick, but we don't see him being S tier worthy anymore, so we'll be moving him down to A. Qiyana has been tearing up the higher elos over the past few patches, so a few nerfs are headed her way. Base AD is going down from 66 to 64. Armor growth drops from 4.7 to 4.5, which ends up being a total of 3 armor at level 18. And then passive bonus AD ratio is going down from 30 to 25%. Armor nerf doesn't really matter, but the base AD change and passive nerfs will. And as a result, we're going to be demoting Qiyana down 1 tier, going from S into A. We have a bunch of Taliyah changes for this patch, with her Q mana cost dropping. However, Q damage will be going down. We can see that if all 5 rocks hit and you're on your Archangel completion, damage is down from 407 to 353, which is a huge nerf. Boulder damage is also going down from 231 to 211. Mana cost is being lowered from 65 scaling to 85 to 55 scaling to 75, while Boulder mana cost is down from 20 to 10. So that Taliyah jungle doesn't become complete garbage, Q bonus monster damage is up from 10 to 20. E base damage is dropping as well from 25 scaling to 105 to 15 scaling to 95. EAP ratio is going up from 30 to 35%, and then E monster damage is up from 175 to 190%. So these are some pretty big early to mid game nerfs to Taliyah. The AP ratio buffs will help to even things out later on, but since you'll be affected by the early game nerfs in every single game, these changes definitely land as net nerfs. Taliyah was already pretty low down in the mid lane tier list in B tier last patch, so she could honestly drop to C for 25.18, but we'll keep her in B for now, as we're optimistic she won't be quite on Azir level of weak. So it's actually a pretty big patch for mid lane in 25.18, as we have a bunch of champions moving around. A couple of mages have seen a nice boost in power over the past 2 patches, as Hui and Cass get better for 25.18, and then Vel'Koz and Xerath have both become stronger. Xerath and Vel can both take advantage of the Horizon focus buffs from last patch, and then Vel'Koz has been directly buffed in 25.18, which we will cover more in detail when going over support. E cooldown is down by 2 seconds, and R damage is up at rank 2 and 3 in the spell, so Vel'Koz mid is honestly going to be one of the best mid lane mages for this patch. Whether we see that translate into any sort of play rate boost is hard to say, as Vel tends to be pretty underrated as a mid laner, but if you are someone who enjoys those strong picks that fly under the radar, Vel'Koz is a great pickup for this patch, as he'll be up in the S tier. Of all ADCs who could be buffed right now, Riot has decided to help out Ashe for 25.18. It's her AD growth that is being increased, going from 2.95 to 3.45. This ends up being an 8 AD increase at level 18, which is nothing too over the top, but it's not insignificant either. Change likely adds somewhere between 0.5 to 1% win rate to Ashe, and considering she has already been an above 50% win rate ADC in recent patches, we're looking for her to be one of the better S tier picks for this patch. Yunara is the only other ADC being changed, and it's all nerfs headed her way. Base health is going down from 600 to 575. Base AD drops off from 56 to 53. E movement speed is down as well from 50 scaling to 70% to 30 scaling to 50%. And then E movement speed duration is going down from 1.5 scaling to 2.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds at all ranks. So these are some of the bigger nerfs we have seen this patch, as a 3 base AD drop likely leads to a 1% drop in win rate, and then the other nerfs on top of that probably tack on another 0.5% drop. As a result, we don't see Yunara being all that great for solo queue moving forward, so we're going to be dropping her from A into B tier. So for the ADC meta right now, there are a bunch of really strong champions to choose from. We forgot to mention Senna in our most recent tier list for ADC, but she's back to performing really well in the role due to her 25.17 buffs and will be bumped up to S tier. It was Senna's attack speed scaling that was increased in 25.17, and combined with the Q buff led to her gaining around 2% win rate, so she's definitely worth picking up again. Vayne is being moved up to OP tier for this patch, as we think she's really being slept on right now with how strong Hexplate is as a third purchase for her. 3-item Vayne is just unstoppable right now, as you deal a ton of consistent damage and have so much mobility and durability. Kiting around with Hexplate passive active is so easy because of the 20% movement speed boost it provides, and if the enemy doesn't manage to get on top of you, you're impossible to one-shot because of the 450 health. With Hui buff for this patch, if you want to play a mage bot and don't want to default to the more popular Ziggs option, then Hui is definitely one of the best alternative bot lane mages that you can choose. If you want to shake up your support champion pool for 25.18, then Amumu is going to be a really great addition. Amumu's Q cooldown is dropping from 16 scaling to 12 seconds to 16 scaling to 10 seconds, and this is big for support Amumu because Q is the spell that you max out first. first. So once you hit level 9 and are skirmishing in the mid game, 2 seconds off of Q cooldown is absolutely incredible. Q mana cost is being changed as well from 45 scaling to 65 to 50 flat. Despite his lower play rate over the past 5 patches, Amumu support has hung around between a 50 and 51% win rate, so with these buffs coming through, he should be in a great spot. So we're going to be placing Amumu in the support S tier, and if you want to pick him up for this patch, then our brand new commentary from our challenger support Rhino can really help you out. And then the only other support who's being changed for 25.18 is Vel'Koz. So Vel'Koz has been a huge winner over these past 2 patches. Indirectly buffed for 25.17 with Horizon Focus becoming stronger, and now directly buffed for 25.18. It's his E cooldown that is dropping from 14 scaling to 12 seconds to 12 scaling to 10 seconds. So the thing about Vel'Koz is that his E is his only self-peel tool. That means when it's down, he has to play extra safe because he becomes super vulnerable to any melee support engaging on it. With E cooldown dropping by 2 seconds, it opens up more windows of opportunity for Vel'Koz to be aggressive in lane, which is great. R damage is buffed as it will stay the same at level 6 with rank 1 in the spell, but when you hit level 11 and get rank 2, the damage will be higher than before. You usually don't hit level 11 as support until much later in the game though, so support Vel'Koz won't be able to take advantage of this buff as frequently as mid lane will. Especially in the higher elos, games will oftentimes just end or be very close to ending as you hit level 11 on support, so we definitely see this buff helping out low elo Vel'Koz more significantly. We don't see these buffs being enough to warrant a move into the OP tier for Vel, but he's going to be an amazing S tier pickup for 25.18. So the support meta is going to be pretty similar to where it was last patch, with Melio and Nami continuing to dominate the meta. We definitely thought some Melio nerfs would be issued for this patch due to how much he's been excelling above all other enchanters, but Riot's decided to give everyone another patch to abuse his current power level. The support meta is honestly aligned pretty nicely right now, as there's about as good of a mix of mages, enchanters, and melee supports in meta that you could ask for. The big 3 support mages being Zyra, Brand, and Vel'Koz are all phenomenal pickups for solo queue right now. Amumu will add a nice touch to the melee support pool for 25.18, as on top of him you've got Braum, Poppy, and Leona, who are very strong options. Nami and Melio lead the way for enchanters, but the likes of Janna, Soraka, Sona, and Morgana are not that far off power-wise. If you're a Morgana main, then this is the perfect meta for you, as she's currently an S tier pick in mid, jungle, and support. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 25.18 edition of the SkillCapped solo queue tier list. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.